Hello there, welcome to today's session of Every Mark Matters with Mr. McDonald's. Today we are going to have a look at explaining the importance of the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876 for US government policy towards the Plains Indians, and that is an 8-mark question. As you are well aware, these questions are made up of 3 components, and what we are going to do is we are going to break up these questions and break up this question here into those 3 components so we have a strong understanding of what it's asking us to do, and to have a clear understanding of how to get full marks for this question. So firstly, our first component is the command phrase. That is explain the importance. Now, I would have spoken to you about this before when we've looked at other explain the importance questions. This is just a cheeky explain why. And if we put this actually into an explain why question, so let's have a look here. So the real question is explain why the Battle of Little Bighorn, I'm just going to put LB, was important for US government policy towards Plains Indians. That's all this question actually is. It's just an explain why, almost as if it was an explain why for your paper 1 with medicine or your paper 3 with civil rights or Vietnam. So it's just a simple explain why. So that means that the technique is the exact same. So in which case then, what we need to begin to talk about now is we need to have a little look at our focus. Okay, so let's have a look at the focus of our question. So I'm going to just write this down here, the word focus. And our focus of the question is the Battle of Little Bighorn, absolutely, and its changes towards the policy, or the US government's policy, as a result of the Battle of Little Bighorn. So for this question, you write two paragraphs. So just think about now and annotate the word focus with what do you know about how the Battle of Little Bighorn changed US policy. So move away from the idea of what actually happened in the battle. For right now, you just need to make sure that you're coming up with ideas about how policy changed towards the Indians because of the battle. So I'll give you now 30 seconds to press pause and have a bit of a think about how US policy changed towards the Plains Indians. 30 seconds. I'll see you shortly. Welcome back. Okay, so hopefully there, what you've done is you have spent a little bit of time applying your own knowledge to this focus of the question. The music's got a little bit intense, let me just change it. So let's have a quick look then. So the focus here is what we want to talk about. Is we want to talk about the changes to the focus of the question, changes to US government policy. So let's start with, well, we have white settlers want revenge. So I just want to really make this clear that prior to this, the white settlers just wanted them to become Christian. So I might just add in prior equals Christian. After equals revenge. And again, you can add in here, well, we need to remember that it was a massive defeat, wasn't it? And again, what you might want to acknowledge here, and this isn't necessarily a reason, but it's relevant to the focus, is that General Custer was a huge hero. And the actual battle itself was, as you well know, was called Custer's Last Stand. Okay, so maybe that's our first reason. Let's have a look at the second reason. What might be the second reason why this event is important? Well, if we're talking about US government policy, well, what we have is we gradually see the creation of assimilate or die. And what that means is that not only do the white settlers want revenge, but now the US government become cruel to the Plains Indians. And that is, I mean, what we have here is, remember, you can refer to the Dawes Act there, can't you? What you could also refer to is you could refer to the buffalo and the extinction of the buffalo. Again, this ultimately will lead to Wounded Knee, with the massacre at Wounded Knee. We also have, well, we've got the Oklahoma Land Rush as well. We'll also have boarding schools. And as you can imagine, we have even smaller reservations. Okay, so there's our focus. We've annotated the word focus with what we know, and we do this because it allows us to build schemas, massive models or maps of knowledge in our brain that will help us answer the question appropriately. And then the final part I want to show you is the second order concept. And our second order concept and that is importance. So to simply put it, is when you're explaining, you can use phrases such as this was important because. And by doing that, what you're doing is you are directly applying your explanation to the actual focus of the question. Okay, so we've broken apart the question there. Again, I just want to remind you that as this is an 8-mark question, you know, what you're going to do is you're going to spend 10 minutes doing this. You're going to write down 2 paragraphs. Okay, if we were to create a success criteria for this question, so let me just create a little table down here. And if we want to focus on, again, we're only focusing on AO1 and AO2 for this particular question. AO1 is your knowledge or your facts. AO2 is your explanation. All right. And if we want to focus on, because in order to get 8 marks, what we're going for is we want to have a look for level 3 and level 4. So let's just focus on level 3 for now. So again, these levels, that does not mean grade 3. And level 4 does not mean grade 4. What I mean is this is the quality of your answer. So as an individual answer's strength, the strength of an individual answer is graded through level 1, 2, 3, and 4, and all we care about is level 3 and level 4. So for level 3, what you need is 2 facts per paragraph. And for level 4, you need 2 precise facts. Per para. Again, for level 3, for your explanation, what you need to do is you need 2 sentences of explanation. That is how and why. I'm going to struggle to fit this in. For level 4, something that we're all capable of, is we are going for 3 sentences. Per paragraph. And that is how, why, so what. And again, I just want to make this really, really clear. So I'm just going to define what that is. So how did X, and I'll just clarify that, that's your reason, slash points, so that's your points. Okay, how did your X lead to, and again, I'm just going to refer to the focus of the question, lead to changes to US government policy. Okay, why did X lead to changes to US government policy? And so what? So what? Now, because it's an importance question, we can just use the phrase, this was important because, and that it emphasises your importance. So what we will do is we will just say, this was important because. All right, and that is your so what there. I've just acknowledged here, this question here doesn't make any sense. So how did X lead to changes in US government policy? So it's really, really simple, that. All right, and what that is something called analytical explanation, which is exactly what the exam board is after. So, ladies and gents, it is a 10-minute question. In this 10 minutes, you will be explaining, or you will explain the importance of the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876 for US government policy towards the Plains Indians, and that is 8 marks, meaning that you will spend 10 minutes and 2 paragraphs answering the question. I'm going to suggest I would like you to set a 10-minute timer on your phone, and at the end of that 10 minutes, we will have a look at yours and we will have a look at mine, and we will self-assess our own work looking at the success criteria down here of 2 facts a paragraph, 2 precise facts a paragraph, 2 sentences of explanation using your how and why, 3 sentences of explanation of how, why, so, what to get a truly analytical explanation. Ladies and gents, you have got 10 minutes. I'll see you shortly. Welcome back. So, hopefully you have spent 10 minutes having a little look at the explaining the importance of the Battle of Little Bighorn for US government policy towards the Plains Indians. This is part of Edexcel History Paper 2, American West. This is one of the final questions that you'll do in the paper. And I'm hoping that you've spent 10 minutes having a little look at this. So let's have a go at reading through mine. And as we'll read through mine, what I will do is I will annotate AO1 and AO2. And I'm looking for, when it comes to AO1, is 2 precise facts per paragraph. And when I'm looking for AO3, I'm looking for my how, why, so, what. Now, I'm really conscious of my handwriting, so I'm going to read out the answer to you as I'm going through it. Let's have a quick look then. One reason why the Battle of Little Bighorn was important for US government policy was because it changed it changed settlers' attitudes towards indigenous peoples. So that first sentence there, that is my points. That immediately is AO2. I am presenting the reasons for how it led to changes, or why the Battle of Little Bighorn was important. What ideally I need to do now is I need to begin to add in my own knowledge, add in my evidence. From my own knowledge, I know that General Custer and his men were massacred by the Sioux. So there's AO1 and AO1 for the Sioux and General Custer when they attempted to attack a Battle of Little Bighorn. In fact, because I've put the Sioux, I'm going to put that as AO1 plus for the specific naming of the tribe. And again, for Custer, I'm going to put AO1 plus for the specific naming of the leader. And again, as I'm going to add in that they attacked, when I say that they were attacked at the Battle of Little Bighorn, that is AO1 as well. I also know that 225 US soldiers were killed and many bodies mutilated and or scalped. So again, there's AO1 plus with my specific subject knowledge, and again I've added in my second facts there. So as you can see, there is my evidence, where I have got my point, and I've got two facts of evidence, two pieces of evidence with lots of precise knowledge. Sioux, Custer, 225 US soldiers were killed and many bodies mutilated or scalped. So let's have a look at now. What I want to do is I want to begin to look at my why. So the rest of my answer will purely be explanation. This was a shock to white settlers, and it missed out it caused them to want to destroy the nomadic lifestyle of the indigenous peoples. Whereas before they simply wanted them to learn the values of the white settlers and Christianity. Plains Indians now had to be assimilated or be killed. Therefore, the US government kept decreasing the size of the Plains Indians' lands until the closure of the Indian frontier, forcing the Indians to rely on the US government and making them more easier to control. So, allow me to just demonstrate my how, why, so what. So this was a shock. So what I'm doing here is I'm explaining how this led to this. So again, here is my how. How did it lead to a change in US government policy? Well, in essence, it made the white settlers want revenge, and it made them want to force them to assimilate into society. Plains Indians now had to be assimilated or killed. Right, there is my why. I think I've got a little bit more why coming up. Therefore, the US government kept decreasing the size of the Plains Indians' land until the closure of the Indian frontier, forcing Indians to rely on the US government, making them more easier to control. And again, I have got a little bit more why down here. And then finally, I have my so what. What was special about the Battle of Little Bighorn? Well, it made the US government want to reduce the size of the land and make them even more crueler. I think what I probably should miss out here is maybe I want to rephrase my answer or my final sentence to say this was important. Because just to make it really, really focused, but you'll see here that I've presented a reason, I've got two facts to back up my reason, I've got how, why, so what to explain how did the fact that it changes the settlers' attitudes lead to changes in policy. Why did the changing of settlers' attitudes lead to US government policy? And what is special? Why is this a reason important? Let's have a look at my second paragraph. Another reason why the battle was important was because it led to the US government viewing the indigenous people as a real threat. So again, there is my point. Alright? And what I've done there, and again, just like the last one, that all of this is AO2. I've just presented a reason. That's AO2. Let's have a little look now. I'm looking for evidence. So again, just to clarify, my point here is they were viewing the indigenous peoples as a real threat. This was because the Sioux overwhelmingly defeated Custer's 17th Cavalry. Right, so there's AO1+. Backup was sent in the form of the US Army to force the Sioux to return to their reservation. Due to the US government feeling more threatened by the indigenous people, they were treated much more brutally. This led to a massacre at Wounded Knee as the US Army felt threatened by the ghost dance. Therefore, the US government changed, US policy changed to react brutally to the possible threats from the indigenous peoples. Okay, wowzers. Right, okay, so I think my first paragraph is stronger, by the way. Let's have a look at my second paragraph. Alright, so this was because the Sioux overwhelmingly defeated the Custer's 17th Cavalry. Right, so absolutely. So there's AO1 there, so I've presented one reason, right? I've given one fact. Let's have a look at my second fact, which I think needs a little bit of work. Backup was sent in the form of the US Army to force the Sioux to return to their reservation. Now, I think this is what I'm, in hindsight, I'm thinking that is supposed to be my second fact. But what I think this sentence here is missing, it is missing an as a result. And I don't mean that using the phrase as a result to explain, I mean what happened as a result of the battle, what happened next. But let's continue, let's have a look at my explanation. Due to the US government feeling more threatened by the indigenous peoples, they were treated with much more brutality. So here, there is my how. So how did it lead to the fact that they viewed them more as a real threat? Well, because they lost, it led to them treating the indigenous peoples more brutally. This led to the massacre at Wounded Knee. So again, I've nicked this phrase here. That's a classic consequence phrase there. This led to the massacre at Wounded Knee as the US Army felt threatened by the ghost dance. There's my why. So why did it lead to, or why does it show that there's a change and they fear them more as a threat? Well, if they didn't view them as a real threat, they wouldn't have killed them at Wounded Knee, as they were clearly threatened by the ghost dance. Therefore, the US government, a US policy changed to react brutally to the possible threats of the indigenous people. And there's a really weak so what there. It is. I'm going to put that in capital letters. That's a really weak so what. So again, what I probably should have done is probably should have put this was important because. But, and just in case you didn't know, I do this in the 10 minutes when you pause it. With some clever video editing, I do this in the 10 minutes, so it's pretty. I'll always admit to the shortcomings here, because I think the timing of this course is really difficult to get on with, but I always try and demonstrate where I can do better, as it's a great way for you to see that critical thinking. Right, let's have a quick look then. So, if I just go back to my knowledge, well, I have got 2 facts per paragraph, absolutely. So if I just go AO1 and AO2 just down here, right? So at a bare minimum, it is level 3. Let me just double check for precise knowledge. Have I got precise knowledge? Yes, I have, with 225. Have I mentioned the Sioux? Yes, I have. General Cuss, I have. Custer's 17th Cavalry, right, I have. So, in which case then, and there's other bits of knowledge. I mentioned about the ghost dance. I've mentioned about Wounded Knee. Again, there's knowledge in there. So I think in terms of AO1, I am certainly level 4. Let's have a look at AO2 then. So again, to go through an AO2, level 4 and AO2, what we're going for is we are going how, why, so what. So let's have a look at my first paragraph. And I think the explanation here is really, really strong. There is certainly plenty of explanation with how and why and so what. Probably needing that last sentence to be rewritten here with this was important because, but I think the how, why, so what is really strong in this first paragraph. The second paragraph, as I mentioned a moment ago, I don't think is as strong. So here's why I think it is. I think it is probably. I think the examiner would give it level 4, but as we're told to be quite generous, but I think this isn't fantastic. So I'm going to put it as a level 4 minus, meaning that would work out to be 7 out of 8. But you get the idea there. In order for me, if I'd have just written that second bit of explanation in the second paragraph to be maybe just using a bit more of this phrase, this was important because that would have been 8 out of 8. But 7 out of 8 is absolutely fantastic. The idea here is that if you are constantly level 4 all the way, you are going for grades 7 to 9. And if you are constantly level 4 or level 4 minus, then you will be knocking on the door of a grade 9. So this is why we do stuff like this. If you want to spend time now revisiting the success criteria and self-assessing your own answer, and I will see you next time. I'm eternally grateful for your hard work. Keep going. You're doing great.